And then I'm going to share it to all of these to Facebook.
Okay.
That's complete, so that'd be good too. Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know if you were waiting, sorry, we're a little bit late. Tech, we all know that. We're used to that in the pandemic or our new world. I am Elishba Johnson. I am one of 4 co-founders of Wari. If you're not familiar already with Wari, we are a Black Arts Center in Seattle, Washington. We're situated in the central area, which is our formerly redlined neighborhood, where it's experienced drastic gentrification. And Wari uses the power of Black artists and their work to think of ways to combat that gentrification and displacement through Black joy, like I said, Black art, lots of different things. And we have had the joy of working with Robin Holder over the last year to bring incredible works here to Seattle. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then she's going to talk about her work, and we're going to have a little informal conversation with you today. So Robin Holder is a New Jersey-based artist and arts educator whose work centers on issues of identity. She's a recipient of fellowships, grants, and awards from the Clark Huling Fund for Visual Arts, New York State Council for the Arts, the Brooklyn Arts Council, Manhattan Graphic Center, the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, and Brooklyn Cable Access Television. Her work is included in significant collections, including the Library of Congress, Con Edison, the Washington State Arts Commission, and the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. The catalog for her retrospective in American Consciousness is available online at the Driscoll Center for the Study of Visual Arts and Culture for African Americans website, and Ms. Holder has completed site-specific public art commissions for the School Construction Authority, the MTA of New York City, and the Connecticut Commission of the Arts. Many, many more. She's very, very accomplished. People know her all over the country. We're super excited to have you today. How are you doing, Robin?
Well, I'm good. Thank you, Alicia. But I am thinking about your gracious hospitality when I stayed in Seattle in Central District. And interestingly enough, that experience of seeing how Wari works with the community, supports the community, creates venues and platforms for the community, allows different components of the community to have a voice and grow. It's very connected with the mission and the thematic issues of the work that I was showing there. And now is an opportunity, because here I am back in New Jersey in my studio, to share some works that are aligned with the exhibition I have at Wari. And actually, they were the works that we originally considered exhibiting. But the whole thing really has to do with home, with what does home mean in terms of how we identify ourselves. What are the markers and the references, the people, the experiences, the locations, the places that we have lived that help us understand who we are in the world, who we are internally to ourselves, who we are in relationship to different parts of the society, and how we move around the society. So if you give me a minute, because I'm not as tech savvy as you, I'm going to share my screen and show some of the works from that series that I did called United States of Anxiety, which I thought made a lot of sense for me, because USA, United States of America, and USA, United States of Anxiety. And interestingly enough, after I started this series, I heard on PBS that they had a program that they were streaming called United States of Anxiety. I thought that was very interesting. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and hopefully I will be successful. And you let me know if this is working.
You got it.
So I'm going to just let these images kind of scroll for a minute so people can take it in, digest a little bit of the images, and then I'll talk about what they are about, how I conceived of it, the kind of research that I did, the components that I used. These are all about around 40 inches by 30 or 36 inches, and they are shaped irregularly. And if you notice, they are portraits inside of houses, and the houses are slightly off balance. They're slightly askew, which I created to symbolize that our entire country is, well, I want to say slightly, I mean, very unbalanced. But the idea is people are trying desperately to try to maintain a sense of security, maintain a sense of future, maintain a sense of self, maintain a sense of prosperity, maintain a sense of positive attitude towards society, but everything is very difficult because of the complex problems. I feel often that the entire United States is in a pivotal time. It's almost as if it's a decline of a civilization because our infrastructure is not working. And I firmly believe that unfortunately, many of us do not understand the structure of the economy, the structure of racism, the structure of imperialism, the structure of how the country manipulates resources. And so therefore we do not understand that basically 99% of us are in the same situation of really wanting the same things for ourselves, for our families, for our neighbors, for our coworkers, for our colleagues. And we tend to pinpoint components of our characteristics or components of our culture or components of our identity and attack others if those elements are unfamiliar to us. And that is a very seriously, a desperately unfortunate thing because this country always heralded diversity, always heralded the unusual intermix of peoples from literally all over the world. So I think what I will do is I will now pause on one of the pieces and talk a little bit about it. And Alicia, if you have any questions, just feel free to
compliments.
ask.
I mean, I think you're going to talk a little bit about your materiality, so I'll let you do that. But I was definitely thinking like, how do you choose? Like you work in so many different mediums, right? So I can pause that for later, but yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Alicia, because I think that has a lot to do with my track and the progression of my work throughout the past 30 or 35 years. I always was convinced that if I would shift my theme focal point, although everything that I do is related, and if I would change the materials from printmaking to painting to drawing, I would have a sense of restlessness and a sense of doing something I can't quite do, doing something that I can't quite predetermine, which I think generates a level of humility, because if I feel like I can not quite do something, I have to stretch, I have to research, I have to experiment, I have to try. And it creates a situation emotionally and mentally and also physically of continuously learning. So because I realized in my early 30s that if I stayed with one media, like if I, at that time I was really very much based in printmaking, if I stayed in printmaking, it, as extraordinarily ample as printmaking is, there would not be opportunities to do some of the other things that I've done, like the public art commissions, the paintings and the collaging. So these pieces of United States of Anxiety start with a colored pencil portrait. And this, I think, is a very intimate approach for me because they're small, and using the pencil is a very visceral extension of one's hand. There's not a lot of broad body movements. There's not a lot of machinery. There's not a lot of very large scale canvases or boards. It's a very personal thing. And I think a person's
close on your work, not to interrupt you, people can see, like you can see the actual hand strokes that Robin puts into her work.
Yeah, you can. Thank you so much for saying that. You can see a little bit of the texture, and I think it adds to the expression on the face, which is, I mean, how would you describe this expression on this face, Elishaba?
Mildly shocked.
Yeah, mildly shocked, inquisitive, wondering. And so, of course, then we go to equal under the law, and this is a man of color. So we have this mandate, we have this understanding in our national legal system that we are all equal under the law, but BIPOC people are not equal under the law, and particularly African American men. And we all know that. And we have extraordinary code switching things that we do to maintain our safety and maintain our balance and maintain our ability to move around in general society, to go to work. But we know that we really are not equal under the law. So what I was trying to do is show this reality, basically, that an African American man, or many BIPOC men particularly, but women also, are not equal under the law. But I wanted to express it in a very personal, kind of almost gentle way, because I didn't want to have a shock factor. I didn't want to have a brusque, very powerfully directed, revealing kind of a message. I wanted it to be something that seeps in down into your consciousness, like equal under the law, because that keeps a person pondering about this. What is that? What does that mean? I think often when we use things that are very shocking, obviously very shocking, it's so overwhelming that it's hard to engage with. So that is my mission here, is to show this very internal, personal concept, because even though we Black folks know how the society of the structure of the society is, there's always a moment where it's kind of like, what is this? What is this? We know how it came about. We know the relationship between capitalism and racism. We know our experience. We have thousands of instances in each family. Everybody can relay many, many instances of being ignored, sideswiped, cut out, left out, ignored, brutalized, victimized. But underneath all of that, there's a sort of humane question of why? Is this really necessary? So that one is equal under the law. And then what I did was I wanted to have the portraits encapsulated in a structure of a home, because home to me represents the foundation of a person's identity. That's where you begin your understanding of life in the world. Your immediate relationships are with your family members, your neighbors, your sense of what possibilities exist for you or what options you have begin in your home, and begin with the structure of your family and what kind of activity your family members are engaged in and what they introduce and expose you to. So that whole sense of who we are as a human being, as a person, is really beginning at home. So I thought a house represents home. Yeah. So what I did when I started these, it was at the time where we had the economic crash. I think it was 2008, I believe, the big, horrible economic debacle. And I went and researched Detroit, houses in Detroit, abandoned, dilapidated, houses that had been left because they were in foreclosure. The reason I selected Detroit is because this country prides itself on becoming a middle class country, very much due to the auto industry. And it really sees itself as a population of humans that is very mobile, that can travel, because the United States has those 2,000 or 3,000 miles between the West Coast and the East Coast?
3,000, I think.
3,000. Thanks, Alicia. 3,000 miles away from you. You're 3,000 miles away from me. And that sense of movement, that sense of ability to go from region to region. At the same time, we are a United States. We are not a republic. We are a configuration of separate states that all have their own history, their own food, their own music, their own culture, their own economic history, their own cultural history. And particularly for people of color, depending on what state you live in, will determine a lot of your ability to gain access to resources that will improve your livelihood or your status. So I was thinking about that. I hope it doesn't sound convoluted. It's just that it's all very layered to me.
No, it's all, I mean, we do, like, this work also is very much in tandem with the American dream, right? Which is home ownership, I think. And you placing people's faces, their portraits right in the home is really either it's talking about what people can get, or maybe the absence of, as I look at it now, I'm like, so many people can't afford a home in this country now, that this feels like something of the past, that I would be able to associate my own physical body with an actual structure that I could call my own. And so I actually think this work, as it's gone on, right? Because you made this in 2017, it's 2023, 6 years later, it can have multiple layers of meaning.
Yes, and just to remember what I was realizing and witnessing when I was at Wari, for about 3 days, I just sat on the stoop of the main building of Wari, and I watched the different people some people who came to do yoga, some people who came to do some spiritual practice, some people who came to get food. They were all chatting and listening. I mean, that's one of the most glorious, delicious things, is to witness and listen to people's conversations, because it was clear to me that they considered Wari a home. Mm-hmm. And I would see one person come in and then another person come, and they hadn't seen them in a couple of weeks, and then what you explained to me about the change in the demographic of Central District was just torturous, because what percentage had it been African American?
It was around 80% in the 60s, and now less than 8%.
Right. So from 80 to 8. So you have to realize how detrimental this is to a structure of a neighborhood, how detrimental it is to the people who live in that community, who have associations, who have relationships with the grocer, with the neighbor who lends them their lawnmower, with the other neighbor's daughter who you're helping file her application for college, with somebody you lent your bicycle to, like you let me earlier.
Yeah, all of that.
It was so cool. But those relationships between people from home are precious, and they're very important, because they do impact our entire understanding of who we are. And it is an abomination what is going on.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time too, like, I grew up here and we were 12% of the population, and now we're 6, and that includes East African immigrants. We have a large East African immigrant population, which is really great. and I have a lot of friends, but if you're going to just talk about kind of folks who have a longer history in America, that's more like 5%. So it's like 50% of the people who looked like me are disappeared, right? Out of the, not only out of the neighborhood, but out of the city, right? And so I really do appreciate work like this that kind of encapsulates all of those different nuances.
Yeah. Now here's another one. Can you see this clearly?
Yeah, just scroll up a little bit more. Perfect.
Yeah, so this one is this feeling that, and you'll see that there's, in this particular one, the house is really, understanding that it's a house is really centered on that window, and that the window is partially open and partially closed. And this understanding or feeling of apprehension of like, it takes your life away. It takes away your life force when you're anticipating something negative.
Uh-oh.
Doesn't get talked about enough, and that doesn't get is compromised. So that's what that is about. And here again, this is my idea, is to show a person who's a Caucasian, because this affects all of us. The United States of Anxiety series is trying to relay the reality that we are all affected by this lack of stability, this lack of being able to project into the future, this lack of being able to access resources. The interesting thing about it, what I think about a lot, Elishaba, is that psychologically, most United States residents and citizens and people who are here living and working undocumented, believe that they're middle class.
That is interesting.
But we are not, when you look at the statistics, do you know that Cuba has more percentage, a much higher percentage of home ownership than the United States citizens?
Oh, I totally believe that.
And then when you look at countries in Europe, the level of healthcare, the level of education, the level of transportation, good transportation is much higher. The quality of life is much higher. So we are kind of in this diluted state of thinking of ourselves as middle class, but we are not living middle class lives. We are, I think people in the United States, maybe apart from people in Japan, work harder than any other industrialized citizenry. Yeah. And we are getting less benefit from that. So here again, that feeling of, here's a poor person that might be yearning or wondering, you know, like, what's going to happen? How am I going to deal with the realities I have to deal with? And I think maybe some people can't, it's so overwhelming. Maybe some people can't deconstruct our situation. All they know is that the systems of transportation, of healthcare, of education, the cost of food at the market, the feeling of being safe is all compromised, but they may not be able to understand why. And here's another one. And this is really about our future. You know, if this is the world we are presenting to our young people, the lack of addressing environmental change, the lack of trying to figure out how to use maybe more wind power, more solar power instead of fossil fuel energy, the message we're giving our children and young people is not encouraging. And I have been hearing and reading recently that many young people, maybe people between 18 and 30, really do not have a positive sense of what their future is going to be.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Because, yeah.
oh yeah, my son's 11 and he was telling my dad that, he didn't want to go to college. And I've been fighting him on that, but I actually understand that if you're, he's on the internet, he's reading articles, he's seeing what's happening. And do you want to be in debt over $100,000 with a job that probably you won't make enough to be able to ever pay it off? I think there's a lack of choices for our young people that they're grappling with, and the climate crisis is just, and then there was another shooting in Maine yesterday. I mean, I can't imagine actually being his age at this time, and trying to deal with all of that, including a pandemic. But yeah, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, and your son is certainly a very bright, curious. I just enjoyed having him as an assistant when I gave my workshop during my exhibition week. I mean, he's delightful, and to hear that the information that he's receiving is not promoting him to think of going to college, which is actually, when I think about Alicia, but because I like to listen to what anybody who does things with their hands has to say. So people who grow their own vegetables, their herbs, people who work in electrical, in plumbing, in masonry, people who can build things, people can fix a car. They are fascinating because they have a sense of confidence, because they don't really need, and many of them did not go to a conventional college. They learned very extraordinary skills that give them the ability to make a very healthy living. And so I'm wondering, how can we see this situation that we're in a positive way?
Right.
Because we're so convinced, I mean, we are so attached to the idea that you have to go to college or university in order to be successful. But like what your son is possibly thinking is, maybe there's another way for me to become a successful, independent adult without going to college and without owing money. See, the other thing about it is that my mother always told us that owing money was a kind of slavery.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like in the early 1960s, in the mid 1960s. I remember she had gotten a credit card from a department store called Bloomingdale's at the time. And she said, I'll use this, but it's important to know that when you're borrowing money, they own a part of your activity. They own part of you. Yeah. So I always had that in the back of my mind throughout my life in managing and figuring out how to use my finances to make them work for me. So this college situation, and you quoted perhaps $100,000. I think it's closer to $200,000 or $300,000 for many people, because many of our young people are not able or willing or understanding how to do without the way we did when we were college age. There was a lot of things we didn't have. We didn't have a big overhead. We didn't have to pay for internet. We didn't have cable. We didn't have to eat out all the time. So the average monthly bill of a college student now without the tuition is kind of high. So they borrow a lot just to live.
Yeah.
So this is all about the situation and how it can affect our youth, and what do we tell our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews? How can we get them to formulate a vision for themselves that's attainable? And how can we understand who they are individually in order to help them do something that is natural for them and that works in the existing society. So that's a real concern of mine. Now, this is a piece. Can you see this one?
Yes.
Okay. So this is, I hope this is obvious. It's separation border crossing. And this is about the cages that they put the people trying to immigrate across the southwestern borders of the United States. They're coming from Guatemala, Costa Rica, Mexico, maybe Belize. The reason that nobody wants to, I mean, I don't believe that anybody wants to pick up and take a arduous, harrowing, horrific journey away from their home in Central and South America to come here to the United States. They are doing that because they cannot live safely at home. It's often a combination between the economy and the manipulation that their governments are doing to enrich themselves, enrich the 1% at the cost of the well-being of the 99%, or it has to do with global international economic contracts that they have where they're snatching resources from indigenous people or people who have lived in an area for generations and hundreds of years, or it's in relationship to the drug trade, which is amply supported by all of those governments, including the United States. And what country is the largest receiver of all these drugs? It's the United States. So the vicious response that many individual people and our government has to people who have been really put in a position that the only thing they can do or the only thing they can think of doing is to come to the United States, meanwhile, while breaking up their families, risking their own lives and the lives of their children, and then to come here and be put in cages, separated from their families often, is the most horrendous. It's just one of the worst possible things. And it has to do with home. You know, it has to do with, why did these folks leave their home? What kind of a home will they be able to have if they're allowed to come into the United States? If they're not allowed to come into the United States, what will they go back to when they go back home? Will they go back to being at the mercy of the drug cartels? Will they go back to being at the mercy of no jobs available? So this is, you know, the thing is, we hear about these situations and we are given specific instances through the TV news, the radio news, the newspapers, but it doesn't quite sink into people. People will just say, oh, you know, like now, you know, New York City has a real difficulty in trying to accommodate the heavy influx of undocumented workers and people, recent immigrants into the city. And they're talking, I heard 2 days ago on NPR that the mayor was thinking about how he was going to use large open spaces to accommodate some kind of temporary housing for immigrants. And I'm thinking, New York City doesn't have any large.
I know, I was wondering, I was like, okay, where's that?
What is he talking about? The parking lots near the beach? I mean, what is he imagining? The park, Central Park? You know, what area is he imagining that he's going to temporarily house people? And why are they thinking about housing them temporarily? What's going to happen to them after that? So again, it's this horrific situation of people not having a home or being in a lesser accommodating home or in some kind of a makeshift home away from home, often without their loved ones. It's just beyond heartbreaking. I don't even have words to describe it. So this particular structure of a building is a home using traditional, it's sort of in the background and they're playing a visual lesser degree, but these are traditional Mexican tiles. And
Yeah.
these little bands are parts of the flag of the United States of America. So my idea here is to present the reality of people who cross the border and who are separated not only from their home of origin and their culture and family and people that they belong with, but also what kind of a home will they be able to have here in the States.
And for your models, like, do you research and find people on the internet? Do people sit for you? Because that
people,
that picture in that image in particular, you can see the fear in her eyes. So
yeah,
I'm just wondering.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go on the internet and I get photographs of pictures of faces that don't have a copyright law on them, or I combine parts of different faces together. So they're parts of or real people, but for this series, they're not. I don't think any of these people in this series are people that I actually know, because I did do a series of portraits, about 50 of them, of people that I know, and dealt with that with another project. But these are, sometimes I'll take parts of one face and combine it with parts of another face and combine it with parts of another face. And the reason that I started doing that was I was creating a series of handmade artist books for each of our federal holidays. And the one for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I wanted to express Martin Luther King's concept of integration. So part of the book has a series of several small mini pages that have people that have features that are recognizable for certain ethnic groups, but I mixed them up. So like there might be a picture of somebody who has eyes that make you understand that that person is Asian, but then their skin is very dark brown, or somebody whose hair is what we consider blonde, but their features are Asian. So I was having a lot of fun with that, because then I realized there's so many mixtures of folks that this is not that unusual anyway.
No, I was gonna say that's, I mean, we all eventually came,
Yeah, I mean, because
one
like a former New Yorker and growing up in New York, you see so many kinds of folks and so many different, unusual, interesting face types. So when I was doing this series, I was thinking, oh, this is so cool, Robin. You're making Black folks with blonde hair, but then everybody was dyeing their hair anyway. So, but I got that idea of mixing features from faces back when I started that one. And this is another one of these houses here. You can see like the holes in the roof and the falling apartness of it. The understanding does not live in anxiety. I think the message I was trying to convey was, when you understand the reason that something is happening, it kind of takes, or it can take away your feeling of stress and anxiety, because you know how the components weave together to create that particular situation. As they say, knowledge is power. Yeah. So I tried to, in this series, also try to portray young faces and older faces, male faces and female faces, but I'm not really sure how people read them. I know what my intention was. That's always the very interesting thing about creating a series, is that I have a particular mandate, or you probably call it an obsession more than a mandate, because I get very engaged in what I'm doing while I'm doing it, and it sort of takes over everything. And at this point in my life, my son is a grown man, and I don't have that many responsibilities that I can't reschedule. So when something takes over my life, it really takes over my life, because I have the time and the energy. But I try to imbue myself with the thoughts and the realities of the themes that I'm working with. And I try to listen to people talking about their experiences regarding that situation, or watch movies or clips or videos, read books, look at material, and have the entire situation run through me, which is very painful. It's very painful doing this work, in a way, because when I connect with the reality of the human experience, it affects me. It's like they say, if your mind is focused on something, and I believe people who are in sports know this very well, because they go through the games in their minds, they run through the games. They say your body reacts as if it's actually experiencing what you're thinking about, which is probably why I have back problems.
I know, like, wait.
Alicia, but you and I are just too sensitive.
I know.
You know, when you think about something, you witness something, you ponder it, you're living with the reality of it in your mind, and emotionally and spiritually, it becomes as if it's real, even though it could be somebody else's experience. So I think that, and part of it is called, I guess, compassion or empathy, but part of it is the ability or willingness to mentally, emotionally, and spiritually put yourself in another reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, artists are storytellers, right? And I feel
Exactly.
like the points you're making are so perfect as you're kind of winding at the end of your talk, is because you're really talking about the power that you're able to have these conversations with these are really complex, hard conversations, before and right now in the world, right? And your work gives us the container to be able to have those conversations. The work we have right now at Wari that Robin has, it is really much also inspired by, as you said, your mother always told you, living in an apartment complex, that your ceiling is somebody's floor and your floor is somebody's ceiling, and our responsibility to each other. And I think that is, even though that sounds so simple, it is so valuable and important in this moment to actually really think about our connection to each other, our responsibility to each other, and each other's humanity. So yeah, I just appreciate all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that, until we can all get back to appreciating our relationships with other people. And I did witness that during COVID,
Yep.
because people had to appreciate each other, because they couldn't do the things that they were used to doing, and because they were depending on other people, literally, for healthcare, for food, for all of their services. That connection between people, unless we get back to really making that a priority, and making our relationship with nature, and our relationship with the earth, and our relationship with the climate change a priority, I don't see how we can move forward with any level of humanity. It's about feeling connected.
Yep.
Like some people say, you either believe in the law of one or you believe that everybody's out for their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might just, I'm going to stop sharing now because we're going to wind down now, but it might just come down to a matter of a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
do you believe it's important to feel that you're connected to others and to the earth that supports you? That's our basic home. Our ultimate home is planet Earth. And if we don't respect that, and if we don't nurture and care for that, it's like people who say, don't throw garbage in your home. Why would you put garbage around the floor of your home?
Well, and my mom always says, like, we learned from the Egyptians, you can't take the money with you. Right? It's still there. So, I mean, I do think, like, with people like Jeff Bezos, I'm not trying to beat up on him, but it's like, you can't actually physically spend all the money that you have right now. It's impossible. And your children can't spend it all. So why not share? Right. And then, but maybe I think there's something that shifts in people's minds. And I think meritocracy is a really big thing in America, right? Like, if well, you earned it and you worked hard for it. And if you aren't rich, it's because you didn't work hard enough. And as I've gotten older, I've been trying to debunk that for myself, that it's not that I'm not working hard enough. There's systems in place that no matter how hard I work, but yeah, if we could bring middle class.
As I was just gonna say, as an artist, I've always thought of money as a medium of exchange. And I always thought of it's either going to buy me time to do my work, time to take my son on vacation, time to sit around and, talk with friends, listen to friends, time to cook, to travel. And I think we've become a nation of hoarders. It's very embarrassing, like every time you go to the Salvation Army to take all the junk you've collected, it's very upsetting because we have many more material objects than we actually utilize. And that feeling of living in a living museum can sometimes propel us to cleanse out, edit down, use our space for living rather than presenting or storing. And I think it's part of the American mentality, because I don't think that most of our counterparts, people who have the basic same standard of living that we have, or standard of education that we have in other countries, they don't have as many material objects as we have.
Oh no, I stayed abroad in Italy, and you go shopping like twice a year. And like, my teachers would wear almost the same clothes every day, but you would buy really high quality clothes, so it would last you a long time. And that was really interesting to me, because you would think, oh, it's Italy, people buying clothes. And no, you just buy really good stuff that lasts. That's a total shift in consciousness, though, that. And when you brought up the auto industry, because I didn't want to interrupt you too much, I was like, oh yeah, like, we don't make things here anymore, right? And so when we kind of made that shift, then yeah, what do we have? What happens when the economy collapses and everybody that makes everything, or like COVID, everybody that makes everything is some overseas. So bringing people back to the trades might be part of the answer, and getting our hands dirty, actually.
And also, now that I think of it, having multi-generational homes, because a lot of times people can't afford nowadays to have, the grandparents in one home, the parents in another home, the children in another home, that you with their grandkids. That may be something very positive rather than negative, because we're learning to take care of each other, to interface with each other on a daily basis, to share stories, to share experiences, to have that sequence of having somebody. I remember one time in Cuba, I was talking with some friends and I said, well, I could drop something off, next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Will anybody be home? And they said, of course, there's always somebody home. The house is never empty. There is always somebody home because they have a 3-generation family structure that's living in the home. And that was to me, so I was so envious of that,
Yeah. Yeah. I know people that still like their personal space, but there's something to, and yeah, I live in an intergenerational home too. And there's a lot of value to it too.
Yeah. There's a lot, because it also teaches you, I think it also puts a bit of a boundary on our individualism. I think one of the positive things of the American psyche, which affects all of us regardless of color, is that we give ourselves permission to be very individualistic. We can be very individual, and we pride ourselves on our own individual expression. But it can get to a point where it's out of balance and we forget how to interact productively with others.
Yep.
Who have a different pace, who have a different perspective, who have a different situation. So that is another problem with our humanity in terms of let's watch each other, let's appreciate each other, let's align ourselves with each other. I mean, one of the most terrifying situations are the senior citizens complexes. Oh, yeah. Where you have these homes where they're all people of one particular age. And I understand that now. I did read an article about an initiative in Holland. I don't really remember what city or cities it was, but the government was very seriously making an effort to create housing that was intergenerational, and even roommates who were intergenerational. So they were putting senior citizens together with students, college and university students. And for the most part, it sounded like it was really a productive experience for everybody.
Wow, I'll have to look that up. I know that here locally in the Northwest, they would have elementary students come and hang out with senior citizens, and it prolonged their life, right? And there's so much wisdom from our elders in America, where we're kind of cut off from those type of traditions. And there's a lot of stuff that people, especially doing movement work and anti-racist work, that those folks have learned already, that we need to be checking in with them because they already made the mistakes. We don't need to keep making them. And I think that there's a disconnect there. So yeah.
I do notice, Alicia, that my friends and colleagues who grew up in the South of the United States have a lot more patience and humanity in dealing with racism than the folks here in the North. We're very impatient. Yeah. And like so super critical. And like I just recently had a conversation with a wonderful artist who's living in Florida, Kabuya Bowens, and she grew up in Florida, and I can tell that her attitude is, they're racist. Why do you expect them to do anything but that? She hasn't said that, but I can tell from the things that she talks about that's just a given. So let's not waste time on that. We know what to expect from that. So let's move forward productively. And I think that's interesting, because I think here in the Northeast, people are so critical that they forget that other people have whatever their premise is, whatever they believe in, and then you just have to deal with that the way it is.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm with that too. I mean, I have family down south. It's actually a much more peaceful than the passive aggressive liberals who say they aren't racist, but actually are just at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, yes, of course you're a racist. How could you not be a racist? You're completely unaware of the experience of the majority of the population. I mean, it's like, duh, but it gets the resistance to acknowledging that you do not understand how racism has worked is difficult. It's difficult.
Well, this has been such a delight, and I love talking with the incredible artists that show in our space. It's always a gift. You can still see Robin's work at Wari through this Sunday at 5 p.m. So please, please come. And then follow the other things that we do at wanawari.org. Robin, do you have anything coming up soon that you want to shout out for? There are people watching. So
I have a few interviews coming up, and I'll be going to Hawaii next March, which will be interesting. But I'm really kind of anchored in the studio right now, assessing things.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
So we will see you all soon. We hope to see you this weekend if you haven't already